the room. So there we go.
Hello, everybody. If anyone's out there, I'm so glad you could join us. I am Johara Harper. This is on my channel, and I will be interviewing the lovely Dianna about her books that she published. Where did my phone go? Okay, I have the questions on my phone. I forgot where I put my phone.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one forgetting things today, messing up time zones and such.
It happens. Okay. Usually I get to the questions before, but I forgot to. I was running a little bit behind today too, so uh
We are team late authors.
yes, I've been writing for several hours, so I was like, oh no, it's getting close to the time. I better start, getting dressed and setting things up.
Oh, I put on this jewelry about 2 minutes ago. It was very, very timely of me.
So, is there anything you want to say about yourself first before we get into the questions?
Yeah, sure. I am Dianna Gunn. I write pretty much everything under the sun. I am here today to talk about my fantasy horror book, but I've also recently written a nonfiction book about mental health and specifically affirmations. And I have written all kinds of other things for my day job. I actually do like freelance article writing for a living, and yeah, it's easier to tell you what I haven't written than what I have. And I also run events for authors at Weeknight Writers. And we have a really cool event coming up about writing queer relationships.
Nice. Are you ready to get into the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Question 1. What's your WIP about? If it's a sequel, you can talk about the overall story, including previous books.
All right. So my current work in progress is the sequel to this book right here, Moonshadow's Guardian. The second book will be called Moonshadow's Champion, and it takes place a few weeks. It starts a few weeks after the events of the first book, and the main character is a demon. And in this world, demons are actually cursed demigods, so they are cursed to serve humans because the theory is that they are too powerful to be allowed to just roam the mortal realm under their own power and to be able to use their powers however they want. So they can only enter the mortal realm if they are basically like enslaved to a human. And it's like blood magic. It's quite dark.
Oh, wow. Well, sounds interesting. I've been wanting to read your book for a little bit now. Once I get money, because right now I'm broke.
Aren't we all?
True. But yeah, your book does sound interesting. I've never read fantasy horror before, but I've never actually read much horror books, but I love horror movies.
That's
So
fair.
yeah.
You see, the thing is that I used to describe it as fantasy with a small dose of horror, but I was informed that it's actually pretty horrifying. And I think the thing that happened was I watched a lot of really, really. Am I allowed to swear?
I don't care.
All right. I watched a lot of really fucked up anime when I was very young. So like I watched like Neon Genesis Evangelion and Elfen Lied, which are like incredibly brutal and gory at points, especially Evangelion. I mean, Elfen Lied in the first episode is like extreme gore, but then it's honestly kind of lackluster after a while. But I watched those things when I was like 13 and 14, and like even the more like tame anime that I watched, like Inuyasha, which I've been rewatching, still kind of gory. And so I realized that maybe my understanding of what is like minimal horror and what is like what ranks as a lot of gore is not the same as most people's.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I don't scare that easily. Like, I can watch pretty much any horror movie and not really even flinch much. Which is the opposite of my mom and sister, who will be watching through their hands. So, yeah,
I don't think
people.
I've ever encountered a movie scary enough to have me watch the whole thing through my hands. There've definitely been scenes and some things, though.
Uh, yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. People have different definitions of what's really that scary or horrifying or gory. So I guess it depends, you know. So it's kind of hard to classify it. Like, is it little horror? Is it a lot of horror? Because everyone has different definitions of what that even means.
Yeah, and the later books will get darker. I'm also working on a short story collection set in Moonshadow, and that's going to be really dark. That's like all like straight up horror, going all in, and I'm very excited about that. I enjoy torturing characters. It's a
Me
thing.
too. Me too. It's what brings us authors joy.
Exactly. We've got to get it where we can, which is cats and torturing characters, fictional people. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, my series is a little bit like that too. You know, it gets pretty dark, and there's a little gore. There's stuff like beheadings and stuff kind of happening. So, and blood gushing during like a battlefield. So yeah, mine has a bit of gore. I never really considered it fantasy horror, but for some people, it might be kind of considered that. It's not that bad though, but here and there are some scenes like that. So.
Yeah, in the first chapter of this, I feel comfortable saying what happens in the first chapter of the first book. I don't feel like that's a spoiler, but she kind of accidentally kills her own mother.
Oh
So
wow.
we are starting strong on the darkness scale, and something that I realized, I guess at this point it was several months ago, but fairly recently in terms of how long it's taken me to write this book. In the second book, I realized that what I was missing in the opening was murder, so I added a prologue with some murder. Uh, it's a good way to start. What can I say?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, question number 2. What is your MC like?
Rihanna is a demon. As I mentioned before, she has lived a very long time, and most of it has not been pleasant. She has several layers of PTSD. She's also a total badass who wields various weapons quite well, is skilled in various martial arts, and because she's a demon, she heals very quickly, uh, like Wolverine quickly almost, which allows me to torture her much more because then she can like recover from things and I don't have to like insert like a 3-month waiting period between events. Yeah, she's very traumatized and she's very eager to earn her freedom and she really wants to be able to live in the mortal realm just under her own power.
Hmm, nice. Sounds like a cool MC.
Thank you.
No, question 3. What are your other important characters like?
Vampires.
Ooh.
I'm not. That's not a joke. Most of them are vampires. Um, there is in the kingdom of Moonshadow. There is a very unique relationship with necromancy because Moonshadow is a kingdom that is cursed so that the dead rise from the ground, which means that a lot of Moonshadow's culture is based in interacting with the dead and learning how to make sure the dead stay dead. And so there are certain things like their funeral rites uh, that are very heavily influenced by this. And a lot of the characters who exist are actually people who have existed throughout very significant historical events in this kingdom. And then there is, I can't really tell you much about the actual antagonist because we don't actually find out who she is until much later. But she also has connections to sort of Rihanna's extended history of being alive for a very long time. And she is mostly very ruthless, but she does have a couple moments of weakness. Um, and yeah, I feel I'm not sure how specific to get about various characters because there's a lot of like extended backstory, and I'm not sure what qualifies as spoilers.
Well, you seem to have some interesting characters. Sounds
I
like a
try.
fun read with all these interesting characters. Uh, Now, question 4: if your MC has a love interest, what is their dynamic like?
For a lot of the book, they don't really get along because Rihanna doesn't really like working with other people, and specifically doesn't really like working with mortals, and even a vampire does not have the same level of healing and capability that she has because of the type of magic that she has in her veins, right? So she initially kind of just looks at him as someone that exists to slow her down and doesn't really consider that there might be another dynamic, and then uh that causes friction because he's into her from like the moment he lays eyes on her. But she's kind of just a big jerk to him, so he kind of is just a big jerk to her for a while in response. He tries to be helpful and to make himself useful, but also, when someone is cold to you, there's like the natural response that even if you want to like this person, you're kind of like, you're kind of being a dick right now.
Yeah, definitely. Those relationships are always fun. It's like they, there's that attraction, but then they also, kind of don't like each other at the same time at first. So those are always fun.
Yeah. And the other thing is when you are, an immortal being and you've had like thousands of years to live, you look at relationships in a very different way, and you see the possibility, or in Rihanna's case, the way she sees it is a lack of possibility, very differently, because like everyone around is much younger than she is. Even the people who are part of like her extended backstory are still much younger than she is. And they're also all far more vulnerable than she is. Even the vampires are more vulnerable because they can be killed by daylight if they're not taking like the right drugs. There is a drug that allows them to walk during the day. But if they're not taking that, they can literally just be killed by like a stray ray of sunshine. So that gives a sort of a different vibe to the entire idea of having a romance. So it's not even on her radar.
Yeah, sounds about right. um, Question 5: who, despite the love interest, is closest to your MC? What is their dynamic like?
I would say one of the Jacobs, Jacob 2. So in Moonshadow, they have a long line of kings who were either named or titled Jacob. It's sort of a complicated thing where at first it was like an actual name, and then eventually it became sort of like an honorary name that is given to the king when they become the king, because the name is kind of seen as good luck. And he's actually like one of the most of them go by a different name. Jacob 2 is the only one that goes really by Jacob still. And he is someone that Rihanna knew many, many years ago, the first time she was in Moonshadow. And so they have a really beautiful friendship. And the other character that is closest to her is the dragon, Rolf, he was created by Loki. And because Loki is the mischievous guy that he decided it would be really funny to create this like big, fearsome dragon with giant teeth who breathes fire, but actually has like the personality of like a puppy dog. And so Rolf is a very kind soul, and he is with Rihanna from pretty much the very beginning of book one.
So he's like Toothless from How to Train a Dragon.
Yes, but I don't think Toothless actually breathes fire, does he? It's been a while.
It's a plasma blast or something, because all the dragons have
Yeah.
different abilities. So yeah.
That makes sense. And he looks more like visually I patterned him after Haku from Spirited Away.
Nice. Sounds interesting.
What are you growling at? Sorry, one of my cats is like looking at my desk and growling, but I don't see anything on my desk. Not even one of the other cats, which is like usually the only thing she growls at.
Question 6. What's your world like? Is it similar to our world? Is it different? How so?
Moonshadow is definitely not that similar to our world. There are some similarities to our world a long time ago, like kings and queens and various places. And the way that it is like our world is that, you know, there are a lot of bigotries and tensions between people of various cultures and various classes, and people with certain specific powers who are treated differently. But really, there's a lot more actual magic, and there are. Yeah, it's much more magic infused, and the gods in this world are real and do actually interfere with humanity in very direct ways sometimes. And very specifically interfere with Rihanna's life a lot because she's a demon, and the gods are just all up in her business, especially Loki.
Nice.
Not for her.
Question 7. If you write fantasy, what's your magic system?
Uh, that's kind of a complicated question in this instance, because there are several different like ways that magic has expressed itself throughout history, and various times when humans have used magic to such catastrophic effect that the gods have, in response, limited their magic. So while the world used to be very high magic and Rihanna has memories of that, the magic is slowly decreasing. And at this point, most people only have magic that is capable of working on objects. So basically, the way it works is that you can use this type of magic to bring out or strengthen properties of an object that already exist. So, like, you can use a rune, draw a rune on a piece of wood, and have it burst into flames because wood is flammable. But you wouldn't be able to like draw a rune on that same piece of wood and have it start walking around. Like, there are limitations based on what type of object you're working on, and not everyone has magic. It's sort of just people are born with it at random. There are cultures in this world that we don't really visit in book one, but there are absolutely cultures in this world that try to breed selectively for magic, but the ability to do so is very, very hit or miss. It's not super connected to bloodlines. It's sort of more random than that.
Interesting. Sounds complex.
Yeah, I've lived with this world for a long time and developed it in many different stages.
Question 8. Do you like to write major plot twists?
Kind of. No, thinking about it, not really. There are maybe character twists where like someone has a big realization and that changes the way that they act, but in most cases that tends to be those are more of like the side characters who have these big realizations, and it does change how they contribute to the plot, but it doesn't necessarily change the trajectory of the plot, if that makes sense. It just changes where they fit into it, because now they've had this realization and they're like, oh, I should actually be helping this person, or I should actually be hurting this person.
Nice. So like the character realizes it, but it's like comes on slowly. It's not like this sudden plot twist.
Yeah. It's like there are sort of vague notions of this thing, and then they have a really, really like major event happen to them, and they're like, "Oh, that's what this has been pointing to the whole time." And there are also, I guess, maybe the reveal of who the antagonist is kind of unexpected, but it's still built towards. I don't like to have a twist that is totally shocking. I feel like most of the time that doesn't work, and it's really hard to pull that off in a way
Yeah.
that anyone enjoys.
Yeah, I get that. I like whenever there's like clues or maybe some foreshadowing, but it it's like sometimes I like it when it's like subtle, so you still really don't see it coming. But then when you go back to reread it, you're like, oh wait a minute, it was obvious all along. Those are always
Yeah.
fun.
Like a character realizing that like the reason that they hated like this group of people was actually because of like some past trauma, and because you as the reader know about this past trauma, it makes sense to you, but to them it's a realization because we don't actually understand things about our own trauma a lot of the time.
True. So it's like a twist to the characters, but not to the audience.
Yeah, and I think those are the best twists. There are occasional exceptions, but for the most part, I think that's the right way to write a twist.
Nice. Uh, Question 9: what tropes are in your WIP?
Do women with swords count as a trope?
I guess it could be counted as a trope.
Because there are plenty of them. We also have sexy vampires. They are sexy. That's not like the main like point of their existence, but multiple of them are described as like being very attractive, and they're all related to each other. And I basically just built this family to my personal aesthetic preferences.
Hmm.
Sorry, not sorry. If I'm going to write about people, I want them to be hot. Um, yeah, and I think the friendly dragon has become a trope in recent years. I think that's definitely started to be a trope.
Yeah.
Um, mischievous meddling gods, of course. Yeah, those are the main ones that I can think of.
Interesting. I mean, you said your MC and love interest are kind of like rivals, right?
I don't feel like that's the correct term,
No.
because it's more like he's trying to work with her and she's just like, I like to work
So
alone.
the rival part is kind of one-sided on her part.
Yeah, she doesn't think of him as a rival, because she wouldn't generally think of any mortal or recent vampire
True.
as a rival. Has she has a lot of powers that sort of set her apart from a lot of people. And so it's less of like, oh, thinking of him as a rival, as and more just thinking of him as someone that actually cannot help her.
Like a nuisance.
Yeah, that's more accurate. She more thinks of him as a nuisance than as a rival, and they're certainly not enemies.
Yeah.
She has no desire to fight him or anything. She just prefers to work alone.
Ah. Alright. Question 10: what themes are in your WIP?
What things? That's
Themes.
oh, themes. Today is not my best day, apparently. There the big theme is healing, and the big themes are healing and freedom. Healing from trauma and healing from our past, and also seeking freedom and what we are willing to sacrifice in that quest for freedom.
Interesting. Question 11. What was your inspiration for your WIP?
So actually, Moonshadow is a place that my parents created for a homebrew role playing game.
Hmm.
And so I grew up listening to them collaboratively telling stories about Moonshadow, and one of the things that comes directly from their version of Moonshadow, although I've made many changes to other aspects, is the Jacobs. And I have had some people complain about there being too many Jacobs, to which I would like to point to all of the kings of England named Henry. Um, but moreover, that was something that it was very important for me to keep because this is a world that I inherited. And as much as I have made changes and taken liberties, I wanted to keep certain things about it, like the Jacobs and also the relationship that Moonshadow has with necromancy and with the dead.
Oh,
Um, and part of why that was so important to me is not just because it was created by my parents, but also because my dad died when I was very young. And so this is kind of like, this is in a lot of ways an homage to him.
that's sweet.
Uh, yeah, and he liked horror too, so I don't think he'd be too disturbed by the actual contents.
One of my side projects I'm putting on hold until this book is done because I'm trying to get it done soon. It's kind of an homage to my dad as well. So uh, that was question 11, right? So question 12, are you a plotter, pantser, or somewhere in between? If your WIP is a part of a series, how much do you have mapped out for it?
I feel like I become more of a plotter with every project I write, but also I do still discover things during the process, and no matter how careful I am about outlining, I always, always, always have things change as I'm writing. That said, Moonshadow's Champion is the second book, is the last book in the series about Rihanna. But I have 7 other books planned in Moonshadow, and I have all of them outlined, and one of them is sitting at 25,000 words already drafted. Yeah, it's just been really slow going the past couple of years because there was a pandemic or something and it kind of threw everything into chaos. And
That happened.
at some point, you go from I am doing creative stuff because of the struggle and because it's like my way through the struggle to I've been struggling for so long that even my creative energy is tapped out. And that was the point that I hit last year, and I feel like I've only started really getting back into the swing of things in the past couple of months.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you're back to writing and that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, well, more like editing. Uh, but I am pretty confident that this is the final stage of edits before copy editing and proofreading. This is like I have a few. I'm already at the copy editing stage with most of it, but there are a few scenes that need a little bit of story modification.
Nice. Question 13. Who's your favorite character to write in your WIP? If it's your MC, then who is the second?
Actually, it's my antagonist. She's not a point of view character, but every time she shows up, it's just delightful, and she is actually going to play a much bigger role in some of the later books. Her and her the person who is in Moonshadow's Champion, kind of her girlfriend, but girlfriend is like really like making it sound nice because it's more just like do I just say girl toy? Is that like the equivalent for boy toy? Because that's basically
I guess so. I guess it would be.
that's it's a very long ongoing thing. We can't call it a fling, but the antagonist of Moonshadow's Champion does not process people as anything other than tools, really. She has one goal and she will sacrifice anyone and everyone to do it.
Wow. Those are always fun.
Oh yeah, she is a lot of fun, and she really has some excellent opportunities to torment the main character in book 2. She actually does appear in book 1 as well, but she's sort of a minor, like, roadblock on the way to the main antagonist of book 1, and then in book 2 she is the main show.
Hmm. Question 14. It's funny that this is the question because we were just talking about the villain. What's the dynamic like between your MC and the villain? If it's not fantasy, then the main characters towards your MC.
Um, I don't know that I can answer that question without serious spoilers.
Oh.
Uh, let's just say that there is they have moments of understanding each other. My antagonist, her goal is actually quite understandable. It's the methods that she uses to try to achieve that goal, and the sheer ruthlessness and willingness to use literally anyone and everyone. Uh, and that that is something that my MC cannot really get behind.
Yeah.
But my MC does have an understanding of what her goals are and why she has those specific goals. So there is some level of respect, but they also despise each other.
Yeah, obviously. So it's one of those villains that's like you can like understand why they're doing it, but they're still the villain, and how they're going about it is wrong.
Yeah.
Interesting. Those villains are always so interesting because it's like, as a viewer or a reader or whatever, you're reading this and you're like, I can see where the villain is coming from, but at the same time, they shouldn't be going at it this way.
Yeah, that's my favorite type of antagonist to write that also accurately describes the antagonist in book 1. The antagonist in book 1 is much more tragic, though. Like, just her whole story is absolutely tragic. And that's my other favorite type of antagonist to write, and my favorite type of character to write. It's like, and you get a tragic backstory, and you get a tragic backstory, and
I
you
feel
get a
that.
tragic backstory. That's my character creation process. Um, like, I understand that now that there are a lot of problems with Joss Whedon, but at the same time, I also do subscribe to like the Joss Whedon method of character creation, which is figure out what most deeply traumatized them and go from there.
Yeah, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so. Uh, but yeah, I feel that. Just give everyone a tragic backstory.
Yeah, it's also like, and you don't have parents, and you don't have parents, and you don't have parents. A little bit of that is projection, having one parent who died very young and one parent who was just not emotionally available ever. Um, but yeah, that's uh, my way of character development. Kill
Fun.
the parents, throw in some other trauma, and we're good. Right? That's how characters are made.
Apparently. Question 15. Without being too spoilery, what was your favorite scene to write in your WIP so far?
Honestly, actually, that prologue that I mentioned that I added with the murder it's definitely up there. I don't know. The other contester would be like a torture scene. uh, um, and it's honestly, part of it is just because my antagonist is in both of those scenes and I love her, and there's a part of me that's like, maybe I should have written this book about her, but at the same time I feel like she's more powerful as an antagonist if we don't know what she's thinking. And I very much enjoy her, and she does appear in the prologue and then not again until significantly later in the book. And also the prologue, it was one of those weird things where I just went, "Oh, well, I need to have this prologue to better connect the two books." And then it just sort of fell out of my head in a couple of days, and it's one of the best things I've ever written. I've done like 3 passes of editing on the book, and I've changed a couple of lines in it. It just came out really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Question 16. If you're writing a series, do you like ending on cliffhangers? Do you plan to end on a cliffhanger in your current WIP?
I write too slowly. Well, okay, I write fast, I edit slowly. Either way, the result is the same. I put out books too slowly to feel comfortable leaving it on a cliffhanger. I feel like unless you can produce books at like a Brandon Sanderson pace, it's really just rude to leave your audience on a cliffhanger for like 3 to 5 years, or forever in the case of George R. R. Martin. Um,
True. I get that. I write and edit pretty fast, so I tend to get books out quicker. So I tend to leave all cliffhangers and pretty even no matter how big or small in every book until the final book.
yeah, no, I really try not to do that. For a variety of reasons. The biggest one being that like I have too many other things going on. I do edit fairly slowly, and I think it's just rude. But I love chapter cliffhangers.
Chapter
Chapter
cliffhangers
cliffhangers are
are
where it's
fun.
at.
Yeah.
Because then you have the effect of the cliffhanger, but also the person can find out what happens right away.
True. And it makes them not want to put the book down because they want to know what happens next.
Exactly.
Question 17. What's a scene you want to write in your WP that you're excited for that you haven't gone to yet?
Um. Well, I've already written everything.
Right, because
It
you're in
is
the
in late
editing
stages of
stages.
editing. Um. But the scene that I'm most excited to get to in edits is the end, not because it's the end and I'll be done then, but because I recently had some ideas for minor changes that I could make to it to make it hit much harder emotionally.
Nice.
There are actually 2 point of view characters in Moonshadow's Champion, and one of them has a very serious arc with alcoholism. And I've thought of some very interesting ways to like ramp that up and have that impacting things towards the very end.
Hmm, interesting. Sounds exciting.
Yeah. Again, not for her,
Well,
but
yeah.
there are a couple of like very exciting moments for both of my point of view characters at the end though. They do have some spots of happiness at the end. I feel like generally it's better to have some happiness at the end because it is the end of that series. And
Yeah.
while I do have another series, also I'm not doing a cliffhanger because the other series, while in the same world, is not like directly connected. The main character is a different character who is a very minor side character in the first couple books, who I guess I just enjoyed writing her scenes so much that I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm writing 6 books about you now. Whoops. And yeah. So there's that separation of characters, and so there's no that's not the kind of place where you would want to do a cliffhanger, but at the same time, it would make sense to read Moonshadow's Guardian and Moonshadow's Champion before reading the other 6 books. However, I am going to structure the other series, which is currently the working title is Breaker of Chains, in like afterwards. Like it would make sense to read the series in order, but you don't have to.
So, is this gonna be like? It's in the same world, so is it like a sequel series? You know, because it follows different characters, but it's in the same world.
Yeah, it starts about it's 2 or 3 years after Moonshadow's Champion ends, and so there are some big sweeping changes that happen in the kingdom of Moonshadow during Moonshadow's Champion, And so those have a major effect on how things play out. And the series is set like 2 or 3 years later because that's about how long it takes for like the general populace to acclimatize to some of the changes and for things to settle into the new way that they're going to be in Moonshadow.
Interesting. Uh, Question 18. What's your favorite thing to write about? A certain type of scene, like fight scenes or romantic scenes, and so on.
Murder.
Just
Murder,
kill them
torture,
all.
suffering, as well as these books. I recently wrote a short story where uh, the prompt was like bury your gays, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna murder everyone on the entire planet. How about that? So yeah, murder, death, despair. I like writing the really dark stuff.
Sounds fun.
It's quite cathartic, honestly.
I never shy away from killing a character. Just kill them all. Too
Yeah,
many
unless it's
characters
like a
anyway.
cat or a dog, there's a high likelihood that it will be murdered. Even other animals, like I won't be like gruesome with other animals, but I will kill them. But cats and dogs have like immunity.
Ah. Question 19. What do you love most about your WIP and the series overall?
Can I say murder again?
You just love that you're murdering everybody.
I do, but it's also connected to the murder. I really enjoy the necromancy. Strangely enough, I haven't yet written anything from the point of view of a necromancer in Moonshadow, although one of the stories I'm working on will have that finally. Um, but I just have this fascination with the idea of necromancy and the undead and various types of undead. I I find vampires fascinating. Zombies are very hit or miss for me, but they can be used to great effect. And I really enjoy that Moonshadow is a place where I get to explore all kinds of undead and afterlife stuff.
Fun. You just love to murder everybody.
Yes, and then talk to their spirits about it afterward.
I'm glad I'm not a character in one of your stories. I'd probably be dead by now.
Yeah, probably. You might be lucky and become a vampire.
True. Vampires are awesome. They're in my top 3 favorite like supernatural being.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're definitely top 3 for me. There are also some others, but really vampires and demons are the main ones that I've managed to fit into Moonshadow specifically. I have another back burner project which has many more mythological creatures, but in Moonshadow it made the most sense to keep them somewhat minimal. The dragon that we see is actually the first dragon that has been seen in Moonshadow in hundreds of years.
Fun. You should add skeletons. I love skeletons, but they are never used. I have a whole series planned with skeletons. I love them.
Well, here's the thing. The dead that rise from the ground in Moonshadow are some of them are more zombie-like, and some of them have been in the ground so long that they're basically mostly skeletons at this point.
Fun.
There are scenes where you'll like hear the clicking of the bones because they're not really together anymore. They've lost most of the meat from their bones.
Fun. I love skeletons, and you hardly see them in anything. So,
It's true. Do you play video games?
um, not often. I have with my best friend in the past because she's a huge gamer, but I'm not a huge gamer. I played
Okay.
a few things, but
There's a game called Divinity Original Sin 2 where you can actually play as a skeleton.
Ooh,
And
fun.
it has 4 different species, and you can play as a skeleton of any of those species, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
And
Okay.
it is co-op.
Oh, this is the last question. Question 20. What are you most excited for readers to read once it's published?
Do
Or
I
just the
sound like a broken
version?
record if I say murder? I'm really, really excited for people to discover the depths that my antagonist is willing to go to in order to achieve her goals, and to see just how little she cares about anyone.
Fun.
Yeah, I think that she's a great antagonist. She has very understandable motivations, but she's also ice cold.
Those are always the most fun. There's so
Right?
much you can do
I
with
know
those
that
characters.
I have a lot of friends. I know a lot of readers who love that kind of antagonist, and I'm really excited for people to get to know her because she does appear in book 1, but you really don't get a sense of who she is, right? Like, you know that, yeah, there's something off about that one. But in book 2, you really get to understand what is wrong with her.
Fun.
Yeah,
Can't wait to get there and find out what's wrong with
so many things.
her. uh, so did you want to read like a snippet of your book?
Yeah, sure. I will read from uh, the first chapter, a little piece. The bell hanging around Ma's neck rang out, the little sound barely enough for me to hear, and her face darkened. It's time. She grabbed a small cloth bag from the table and ushered me into the demon circle. I moved to the center and then sat cross-legged. Ma had walked me through the ritual a dozen times since we reached the cabin, but my body still shook with fear. Nobody knew much about what happened to demons during their transformations, and the scenarios playing out in my mind grew more gruesome by the moment. Ma leaned forward, precariously hanging across the salt circle, and kissed my forehead one last time. Whatever happens, I love you, she said, her eyes shining with tears. I love you too, Ma. I know, sweetheart. Ma straightened and took a large handful of red rock salt out of the cloth bag. She opened a small hole between her forefinger and thumb, letting the salt drain out as she walked around the demon circle. The clumps melted into the gleaming black paint, making it glow an eerie, almost white. I call upon the power of the great goddess Magdalene, she said, her voice rising slightly with each word, to contain and confine the beast within, to let the mortal live. She dropped a final large clump of salt onto a rune I didn't understand. It solidified instantly, then cracked apart with a sound as violent as lightning hitting a tree. Blinding white light poured out from between the cracks, and the circle around me grew brighter to match. I threw my hands up to cover my eyes and screamed as scalding heat filled my veins. The skin on my hand began to boil and bubble. I forced my eyes closed. I tried to push back a wave of bile, but I couldn't. My body was too hot and filled with something. I was bursting at the seams.
Wow, some first chapter.
Yeah, in
Way to get a
retrospect,
reader hooked.
it should have been obvious to me that for the average human being, this book was going to be pretty horrific. But my horror radar is way off. As well as the animes I already mentioned, I watched Alien when I was like 12. So,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I've watched Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street since I was at least 10, if not younger. So
Yeah.
we just
Probably
don't get
the
to
most
say the
inappropriate thing I
same.
watched as a child was not actually horror, but I definitely watched Starship Troopers when I was like 8. This is not a movie for children.
So we don't get as scared with horror. So we just don't see what some people would consider horror.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I guess all of my beta readers and editors have the same problem because it literally wasn't until I published this book and readers started being like, "Wow, this was really dark," and I was like, "Oh, I guess it is."
Wow. Well, it sounds great, and I cannot wait to read it once I have money and can buy your book because it is one of the top books I want to buy. So I can't wait for it.
That is amazing to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to say for anyone who's still watching that in the description is Diana's Amazon author page, so you can find her books there, and her Twitter if you want to give her a follow, where she'll update her, books and stuff. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I realized time zones before we started and not like an hour into it, because I thought we were supposed to start 5 minutes from now.
Well, my other author interviews have been at 6 p.m. my time. But when we were planning this, I said it'll be like an hour or two because I wasn't sure yet how long they'd be because I haven't actually started them yet.
Right,
But
that's
then,
right. And I was like, if
yeah,
it's gonna be over an hour, then I don't
yeah.
want to be starting it that
So
late.
yeah, so I pushed it up an hour earlier for you, but
It makes me
but
feel very special. Thank you.
you're welcome. But the last two didn't hit over an hour, so I was like, this one probably won't either. So yeah. So that's why it ended up being a little bit earlier than the other ones happened so far.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I'm really glad to be able to have you on here and talk about your books. Sounds really interesting. So if anyone out there wants to read your books, I highly recommend them. They sound amazing. Definitely go check them out.
And look how pretty that cover is. My
Yes,
cover artist
definitely
is
go check it
absolutely incredible. I
out.
cannot wait. It's probably going to be sometime this summer, maybe late June, maybe early July when I reveal the cover for book 2. And if you think this cover is good, just you wait.
Can't wait for that. So thank you again for joining me, and I hope you can join me again sometime in the future when you're working on one of your other books in the series.
Most definitely. This has been great. Thank you.
Awesome. So I will see you next time then.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
You too.